a massive storm was coming. André Juillet, a gameskeeper, is driving his usual route through the countryside near Marseille. He sees a smouldering fire in the distance, but what is burning looks to be remarkably human. In denial of what he has just driven past, he turns his car and goes back to take a closer look. His suspicions are confirmed. The body is well burnt with no ID and very limited capacity to identify it. This may sound strange, but it is not uncommon in this particular area to come across such a scene. It's a way in which the gangs in Marseille settle the score. So it is assumed to be another gang war casualty. They send the body for autopsy in the hope of using DNA to identify the cadaver. They are in luck. Only a few months earlier, this man's DNA had been entered into their database. His DNA had been taken after a fight had broken out whilst he was working as a bodyguard. He was obliged to use force to protect his client. The police were called and his DNA was entered into evidence. They are astounded to discover that this man isn't from Marseille at all. Instead, it is discovered that he is from Chambéry, some 200 miles north. So what is his body doing here, disposed of using the very same method that the gangs of Marseille used to cover up their crimes? The man is Lionel Veronese. Lionel Veronese, 39 years old, known for being a bodyguard to the stars and a pretty handsome guy, who was particularly charming according to the ladies. His nephew had been trying to contact him but has had no response. So after 2 days, he goes to the police to report him missing. He is also aware of some recent rumors regarding his uncle Lionel which add to his concern. Allegedly, he has committed a robbery, breaking into a very wealthy man's house, one with a significant amount of influence in the local area, Philippe Perrier. And to make matters worse, he has also been getting a little too close to Philippe Perrier's wife, Natalie. According to Lionel's nephew, the night of his disappearance, he was supposed to meet one of his good mates, Michael Boeuf, a local electrician, who coincidentally is also a very good friend of Philippe Perrier. The meeting had been arranged to set these rumors straight. This is a lead for investigators, but when they ask Michael and Philippe about the alleged meeting, they both claim that it had been cancelled at the last minute. The investigative team on the case managed to retrieve phone records outlining Lionel's last movements. It is clarified that his phone was last active in Chambéry, as his cell pings the cell phone tower next to his house. His phone is cut at 10:38 p.m. and is never turned on again, so we have no trace of him after that. What is also revealed by the cell tower records is that Michael's phone was in the same area at the same time. Michael had spent the day at Philippe Perrier's house, which was slightly out of town towards the south of Chambéry. At 10 p.m, the time of the alleged meeting, Michael's phone moves to Chambéry. This suggests that either he went home, that's where he lives, or that he did in fact go to the meeting to see Lionel. The problem for Michael is at 10:42, his phone pings once again back at the Perrier's house. Michael claims that he had called Lionel Veronese to cancel the meeting, and this call does exist in the records. But at the time Lionel received the call, he was with his nephew, and his nephew overheard the call. The call was to tell Lionel that he was on his way and he would arrive at 10:15. He would pick him up outside his house in his car. Exactly 3 minutes after, Lionel Veronese's phone signal is lost at 10:41 p.m. We see that Michael calls Philippe Perrier. He calls him 3 times, and when he can't get hold of him, he calls his home phone number. For detectives on the case, it is clear that Michael did go to the meeting that evening. And at 10:41, something happened that was so important, it forced Michael to call Philippe 4 times in quick succession. This is enough for the team to bring Philippe and Michael in for questioning. Throughout the interrogations, Michael and Philippe remain adamant that the meeting with Lionel had never come to place. It is also confirmed by both men that the rumours of the robbery were true. Lionel had indeed robbed Perrier, stealing €28,000 and 2 guns. But the way in which they found out who the thief was even more surprising. Philippe Perrier's devoted wife of many years, Natalie, had told them. She knew all along who the thief was because Lionel was her secret lover. They bring Natalie in for questioning, and they begin by asking her about her affair with Lionel. They had met in a nightclub and she fell for his charm and physique. He was a bodyguard with a thirst for life. He had notoriously looked after many stars, which in his small town made him kind of famous. And that night she fell under his spell momentarily. This had happened 1 month prior to the murder. A few days after the night of passion, they organized a second secret meeting in a dark car park, and the whirlwind romance begins. However, it wouldn't last long because soon after, Lionel begins asking Natalie for money. Although she is the wife of Philippe Perrier, the tycoon millionaire and well-known wine merchant, she personally doesn't have any money that she can give Lionel. Allegedly, he calls her frequently, blackmailing her. Either she pays up or he will spill the details of their secret affair to her husband. Under the immense pressure from the blackmail, she agrees to arrange the robbery with him. She would leave the house in the afternoon, leaving the door open and turning off the alarm, so Lionel Veronese could enter the house with ease. But he is sure to smash the window when leaving to make it look like a real robbery. However, when the police come to examine the scene, they do notice that the majority of the smashed glass is on the outside of the window, suggesting it had been broken from the inside, which the police find suspicious. They also discover that the money and the guns had been taken from a very specific location in the house. So the police confirm to Philip that the robbery was most likely done by someone he knows. Natalie cannot live with the guilt, and the mounting police evidence seems to be closing in on her. She is in a mess, smoking constantly and too nervous to even talk to the police about the robbery. It is all too much for her, and so she spills the truth to her husband. When the results come back from the autopsy of Lionel Veronese, they determine 2 key elements. 1. Lionel was not alive when the body was burned. This is determined by the lack of soot in his lungs, suggesting that he was already not breathing when he was engulfed by flames. And secondly, he had been shot in the back of the head with a pistol, and he had been shot at extremely close proximity. So close that we can almost assume the gun was pressing against his head. The detectives need to figure out how Lionel's body ended up in Carry-le-Rouet, 200 miles away from Chambéry. 2 roads go from his home to where his body was found. So the police mobilize 2 teams. One team will take the main road and the other team will take the back road. Along the way, they check every camera at every service station and every toll stop. But frequently, they find that the cameras are either out of service or the footage is impossible to decipher. At around 10 p.m, the team who are on the back road arrive at a service station near the village of Mornas. This is halfway between where the meeting had taken place and the location of the body. They check through every camera on every gas pump. And at the service station, there are a lot of gas pumps. They've already looked through over 10 when they finally see him. They see in the image before them Michael Boeuf at 5:43 in the morning. But there's something else in the footage. He has a passenger with him, and it's as clear as day. It's Philippe Perrier. The car they're driving is a black Polo, and they know that this car will be full of evidence. It's identified to be Michael's girlfriend's car. Unfortunately, it apparently had burst into flames just 24 hours after Lionel's disappearance. It was in such a bad state that it had been quickly recovered from the roadside and taken to be destroyed. This car was also likely the crime scene. This is a huge blow in the investigation. With the phone and video evidence, the police have enough information to start applying some real pressure on the 2 men in custody. And the first to crack is Philippe Perrier, telling the police that Michael did go to the rendezvous with Lionel. But Michael claims that Philippe is lying. The men have now turned against each other, which is perfect for the police. Philippe Perrier admits that he had lied in the initial investigation about Michael not going to the rendezvous. But that was not the only thing he had lied to them about. There is something much bigger too. If you are huge fans of crime documentaries, thank you to Mr. Bradley, one of our wonderful subscribers, for that brilliant pun. Then you know what to do. You can click on that big red button down there to... You can click on that big red button to... Alright, let's just get back to the story. Philippe Perrier admits Michael had not gone to the meeting with Lionel alone. His wife Natalie had gone too. They had left his house together to go and meet Lionel, and 45 minutes later they are back and Michael announces to Perrier that he has a delivery for him. The delivery is Lionel Veronese. Philippe's immediate response to Michael is that he, under no circumstances, wants to have a conversation with Lionel. Michael reassures him not to worry, because Lionel will not be able to talk. He's dead. Michael has also come up with a plan to take the body to Marseille, and Natalie wants to go with him. But Philippe, in an effort to protect her, decides that he will go with Michael to get rid of the body. According to Philippe, Michael did everything. He had killed Lionel and loaded him in the car, driven the body the whole way, found the destination to dump him, single-handedly took the body out of the car, covered him with planks of wood and set him on fire. All that Philippe can remember is the height of the flames and the sound of the fire. The police question Michael's motive. He wasn't the victim of the robbery, nor was he the victim of the adultery. And he was Lionel's friend. So why would he kill him? Well, Philippe claims that Michael was very close to him and his wife, and he wanted desperately to impress them. So he did it to protect Natalie's reputation. The most intriguing thing about Philippe's revised statement is that he inadvertently admitted that his own wife was present at the crime scene. So for the first time, Natalie, along with Michael and Philippe, has become one of the prime suspects in the case. They take Natalie into custody for interrogation. Natalie confirms everything that Philippe said: the affair, the blackmail, and the robbery. She was at the meeting with Lionel. She had gone to get the money back, the money that had been stolen from them. In her statement, it allegedly gets very heated in the car with Michael, and Lionel is not willing to give any of the money back. Pretty soon, Michael pulls out a gun that Natalie had no idea he had. He shoots in the car, and the sound of the bullet is so loud she remembers it temporarily deafening her. The police, equipped with statements from the Perriers blaming Michael for everything, go back to Michael for his version of events. As you can imagine, he paints a wildly different picture. First off, he claims that he never pulled the trigger and had no reason to either. Lionel Veronese was his friend. Natalie had forcefully intercepted the meeting that was supposed to be between just him and Lionel. But before they set off, Philippe had given Michael a gun. During the car ride, Natalie takes the gun from Michael. Then, when they meet Lionel, things get heated. She quickly loses her cool and fires. When Michael and Natalie return to the Perrier residence with the dead body, Philippe is angry at Natalie for being so stupid and compulsive. He tells her that she has been an idiot, and he organizes a plan to cover it all up. It was Philippe's idea to go and try and hide the body in Marseille. He knew that down there, bodies were frequently found associated with the Marseille gang crime. They were often found but rarely identified. His plan was to set the body alight to the point where it was unidentifiable. Unknown to them, just 6 months earlier, the police had entered his DNA into their database. Where Philippe is blaming Michael for everything, Michael pins everything on Philippe. They had moved the body together, and on top of that, Philippe had ordered them to stop at the side of the road near the Isère River. Why? To get rid of evidence. They threw a bag full of blood-stained tissues that they had used to clean the car into the river, along with the bullet used to kill Lionel and the shell casing. Michael, Natalie, and Philippe are the only ones to know the truth here, and someone is lying. Ballistics experts in Marseille come on the case to analyse the trajectory of the bullet. It entered Lionel's head from just behind his left ear and exited through the back of his skull, and the direction is almost perfectly horizontal. This opens up 4 questions. 1. Could the driver, Michael, have pulled the trigger with his right hand whilst his left hand stayed on the steering wheel driving? The experts determined that this is not the most likely case scenario. 2. Could he have pulled the trigger with his left hand whilst his right hand remained on the steering wheel, reaching over his right hand to shoot? Experts determined that this is practically impossible. Scenario 3. Could Natalie have taken the shot from the back seat with her right hand? Experts determined that that's not possible either because she would have broken the windshield, and we know the windshield was intact. And scenario number 4. Could Natalie have pulled the trigger with her left hand from the back seat? The experts from Marseille agree that this is the most plausible scenario. And one fact that is known about Natalie is that she is indeed left-handed. So, bam, solved. It was Natalie. Well, you and I both know it is never that easy in France. As it turns out, ballistic experts from Lyon are also assigned to the case. And when they are given the same 4 scenarios, they determine that each scenario is possible, depending on a number of different variables. This resets the evidence back to 0. Defeated by the mess of analytic chaos, the detectives decide to go back to the suspects to dig for more information. Natalie is the only one of them who has a motive. She claimed that Lionel had messed up her life. Now he's dead. But is she capable of pulling the trigger for revenge? This is what they need to uncover. They interview her inner circle to gain a better understanding of her personality. Her brother states that she would never be capable of pulling the trigger, claiming she had never even used a gun and she wouldn't know how to. Although Natalie had married into a wealthy family, she remained grounded and continued to work in a care home with old people. She was a woman who is described to have had a joie de vivre, and she was extremely generous with her friends and family. But if she's so perfect, how do you explain the affair and the robbery? Allegedly, she hadn't seen much of her husband over the last few years. He was driven by success and was often away working. She wasn't his main priority. And now that her kids were older, her life was meaningless. She had become depressed. Only 1.5 years before the murder, Philippe had met Michael and they immediately hit it off. They were constantly spending time together. Philippe introduced Natalie to Michael and his partner. They were a couple roughly 15 years younger than they were. The young couple encouraged them to start going out and enjoying life again. They would see each other at least once a week to have barbecues or go for dinner in the town together. Then they would head over to the Carré Retrial, which is a popular square in Chambéry filled with nightclubs. For Natalie, this was a dream come true and she had a new thirst for life. She loved it. But one night, while she was out in the nightclub, she meets Lionel Veronese. We already know that he is very popular with the ladies and is kind of famous in the nightclub, and she falls hard and fast. A game of seduction begins, and after hours and hours of resisting temptation, Natalie finally gives in. She finds herself in the arms of Lionel Veronese. But the love affair turns sour. The question is, did it really turn sour due to the blackmail, money-motivated story? Or was it something else? Close witnesses claim that for Natalie, this was not a casual love affair. The reality was that she had become infatuated. And when Lionel continued his life as usual, which was an incessant tale of seducing a large population of women, she couldn't handle it. She was jealous. It drove her mad to see him with other women. If this is the case, this is no longer a murder to defend one's honor. This becomes a crime of passion, which we know is the most common reason women murder. When the phone records are reviewed, we see that Natalie frequently called Lionel. This weakens the probability that it was Lionel putting immense amounts of pressure on Natalie to get her money. He wasn't placing the calls. Did she just invent the whole blackmail story to cover up her real motives? And is she capable of committing murder because of jealousy? One witness close to Natalie states that when she saw him with another woman, she said, "Qu'est-ce qu'il fait cette merdeuse?" What is this naughty word doing? He's gonna end up in bed with her. Then when the witness is asked if she thinks Natalie is capable of murder, she answers, oui. Natalie has lied multiple times and she has a motive. Michael, on the other hand, why would he take the risk? What motive does he have other than protecting the honor of his new friends? Michael looks up to Philippe as an idol, a successful man who goes on luxury holidays, eats at fancy restaurants, dresses impeccably, and has a hugely successful business. Michael has just started his own business, so Philippe has a lot to offer him, and they have a lot in common. So he is apparently desperate to impress Philippe, to the point where he hires a luxury car, even though he can't quite afford it. He feels the need to be validated and taken seriously by Philippe. But how far would he go for his new friend? We know he helped him hide the body. Is it unreasonable to think he pulled the trigger? Michael is also an arms enthusiast. Just like Philippe, the two men also have that in common. He has 2 fusees and 6 revolvers at his home, and he is known to be very proud of his collection. He is so proud he would bring them in his car to show them off to his mates. This is very frowned upon in France. It's very uncommon to have a gun unless you are going hunting or going to your local gun club. You don't just carry them around for protection. On one occasion, it is alleged that he even shot at an advertising banner right next to a main busy road just to impress his friends. He loved guns. So who shot Lionel? Was it the man who is well practiced in shooting but has a weak motive? Or was it the woman who has barely ever shot a gun in her life but has a personal vendetta? Natalie and Michael are both sent to trial for the murder of Lionel Veronese. Both of them face 30 years in prison if they are found guilty. But it will be up to the court to decide their fate. Who will they find guilty? The decision lies in the hands of the jury. Before we go into the trials, we need to talk about the mysterious trip that Philippe and Michael took together to Grenoble the day after the robbery. They had gone to see a colleague of Philippe's who had a notorious dark side. He was privy to underground deals, specifically in arms. His name is Victor, and he spoke openly to the police about their meeting. Philippe was notably agitated that day and desperately wanted his stolen gun back. Perrier, il était furieux. Il avait les couilles à l'envers. Philippe asks Victor to survey the black market in case Lionel tries to sell the gun. Then he asked something else. If Victor would be willing to intimidate Lionel by any such means, to the point of retrieving the gun and the money. How far did Philippe want Victor to go? Would he have been okay with the idea of Victor torturing him or killing him? Victor doesn't confirm any of this. Ultimately, he had refused to take the job offered to him by Philippe. But he does state that these kinds of operations were never pretty. So was Michael Philippe's second option? Was he the man that rose up to the challenge? Michael does claim to have been given the gun by Philippe before his meeting with Lionel. It was a particular style of pistol, and you would need to be an expert to tell if it had been loaded or not. So you might be wondering at this point why Philippe is not also facing a murder charge. Luckily for him, there is evidence in the case file that on the night of the murder, he wanted them to propose to Lionel that instead of giving back the entire 28,000 euros, he keeps 4,000 and just gives back 24,000. And this is enough evidence for the court that his intention, his goal that evening, was never for anyone to take Lionel's life. This is the biggest thing to happen in Chambéry ever, and there is a massive crowd attending the trial and even waiting outside. It is one person's word against the other, and the most convincing argument will win. The court hears Michael first. He addresses the courtroom calmly, stating what happened on the night of the murder. Natalie, meanwhile, must sit quietly through the accusatory testimony, but it's beginning to get to her. After 1 hour, she is visibly agitated, and it is clear that she is becoming more and more stressed, less and less able to contain her emotions, and her anger is building with every word. After over 2 hours, it's all too much for her, and she loses her cool. She erupts, screaming at Michael in front of a courtroom of over 300 people, including the jury and the judge. "You a-hole, tell them the truth." Michael remains completely calm. he continues to answer the questions in a polite and restrained manner. What the jury claims to have perceived from this outburst is that she is unstable and volatile when pushed to her limits. Not a great look when your freedom is hanging in the balance. Then, to prove whether or not she is physically capable of shooting with her left hand, the court decide to take the jury outside and reenact the crime scene. The ballistic experts from Marseille and Lyon are both present to argue their case. This kind of reenactment is extremely rare in France. They place Michael in the driver's seat and Natalie in the back. They must each take turns to pull the trigger on the passenger in the front seat with the nozzle of the gun almost touching the back of his neck. Natalie is hesitant, exclaiming that she doesn't know how to use it. She makes this very clear and then claims that she remembers the exact position Michael was in when he pulled the trigger. Michael, however, cannot say the same about Natalie since she was in the backseat and so he could not see her. Natalie explains to the jury that Michael was in the front seat with his right hand on the steering wheel and he leaned his left hand over his right hand when he pulled the trigger. But there's a problem. The trigger was pulled with the gun almost touching Lionel, and it's impossible for Michael to maneuver into this position from the driver's seat. With this, the jury's mind is made up. Natalie Perrier is charged with 20 years in prison for pulling the trigger and killing Lionel Veronese. Michael Boeuf is charged with 8 years for complicity in the murder and passing the gun to Natalie. The second trial is another battle for innocence that will go on for 7 days. For the retrial, Natalie has changed. She has returned to using her maiden name, Michelier. She no longer uses Perrier. She has also hired a different lawyer to defend her. Michael has also selected a different lawyer for this trial. The battle begins. Philippe Perrier attends the trial as a free man after having served his 3 years. Natalie's lawyer once again demands a reenactment of the crime scene. But this time they imagine that the victim Lionel in the passenger seat temporarily turns his head to look out the right window. Suddenly this means that Michael could indeed have taken the fatal shot. Natalie's story suddenly makes sense. The second convincing argument in this second trial comes from Lionel's nephew. He gives testimony in front of the court, and in an emotional declaration in front of everyone, he points to Michael and states that he knows he is guilty, because Michael cannot look him in the eyes. Natalie does, but Michael cannot bring himself to do the same thing. It is a strong and moving moment in the trial. Natalie's lawyers are thrilled that this time the trial is swinging in her favor, but the jury's verdict surprises everyone. Natalie is once again found guilty and sentenced again to 20 years for murder. This time, Michael is no longer considered complicit in the murder and his sentence is reduced to 6 years. Our thoughts and prayer go out to Lionel Veronese and his family. Rest in peace. That is the end of this week's story. Thank you guys for listening. We never imagined having such a beautiful community, so thank you so much for being part of that. Let us know if there are things that you want us to do, things that you want us to change. This is Hans, by the way. We are so grateful to every one of you who has subscribed or commented or watched all of our videos. You know what to do if you want to watch more. Click here or here. And until the next time, merci les amis. À la prochaine. Bisous. Be possible.